That's an interesting question, and you would think that the immigration, topic would have really spurred up the Hispanic community, but I haven't seen it happen enough. You know, we've been talking about the DREAM Act and immigration reform for 8 years. It was on the president's agenda in 2008, and you would have assumed that every Hispanic who there isn't a Hispanic in the United States that hasn't been affected by immigrants because they've all migrated here. I mean, even Puerto Ricans, they've migrated to Puerto Rico. They've migrated from Cuba to the U.S. But why hasn't it happened? You're talking about millions of us, millions of us. I mean, I'm just a first generation. I know what it was like when my parents tell me when they came over and they had to apply for a green card. Why hasn't it happened? Because at the same time that we've been talking about immigration reform, the DREAM Act, and immigration change, they have squashed it from happening. So any motivation that we have to make it happen, I feel that they have almost psychologically gotten in our head and say, here it is, but you can't have it. Yeah. And instead of us getting fired up and saying, no, we demand it happen, we've accepted it.
Why do you think so much apathy surrounding it from the Hispanic community?
I mean, I think, this weekend I'm going to an event with Catholic Charities and the Hope Center and regarding immigration reform. People fear. I mean, you're talking about most of the people who will be there this weekend will be unlawful, okay? Or will be related to someone who's unlawful. And they fear what can happen if they're too loud. And so until something happens and it empowers them, which sadly, we've been talking about immigration reform since I've been involved in politics, since 1996. We've been talking about immigration reform. And it still hasn't happened. Yes, we've had a few little gifts. We've had, there was the legislation that Clinton passed in 2000, right before he left office. There are 245I. There have been little things, but there's never been enough. And I feel like it's almost like the term of you can't quite have it. You can't quite get there, and it controls us. It manipulates our community, and we can't see past it. And so what we do is we accept it. We're seeing it continue on, and then on the contrary, we've seen some anti-immigration legislation that is absurd. I mean, I've heard of legislation that basically says if you're born in the U.S. but your parents were not legally here, you're not an American. Now, it hasn't gone anywhere, but that's a game. That's a manipulative game that continues to...
Yeah, and that's almost like gatekeeper legislation, where you have older white people, older white generations who are saying that, no, we were born here, we're not going to allow anybody else to come inside this gate that, we've kept locked for so long. But as it relates to immigration and apathy surrounding these things, because we see it in the Black community as well, where you fight for an issue, we're talking about voting rights again. We're talking about civil rights again. Of course, these things relate to all communities of color, but it's specifically targeted towards Black people because of the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. But I feel like sometimes those issues are used as wedge issues where, to your point, you say it's there, but we're not going to let you have it fully, or we're going to scale some of these things back so that you won't have it. And then eventually, people just get tired. Like, look, I'm tired of fighting these battles. Are you seeing that in the Hispanic community where it's like, yeah, we were passionate about it, but man, it's been 20 years, it's been 15 years. How do you keep people engaged when you see things like this going on?
I see it a lot. I see people who get fired up, who work up, who get organized, and then it fails. And it's like everything they've done was meant for nothing. It's like the Restoration Act going on here in Florida. I mean, there was a huge effort in this last election to try to get this moved. And there's still a big push. But you know what? People get tired. That's how you wear people down. And I believe that the manipulative part of government does that. The manipulative part of politics, let's just clear that up. The manipulative part of politics does that. And I think to some extent, Obama's limited. I mean, I know that President Obama would love to see immigration reform. I know that Senator Kennedy, one of his last dying wishes to see the DREAM Act. This is a senator from Massachusetts who saw this vision in the 60s, and he never got to see it come to light. And I know President Obama wishes he could make this happen. I know it's a promise that he's promised since '08. He continued to say fight for, before, but it's out of their hands. When you've got the rest of the governmental system unsupportive of you, what do? You're one man. You're one man and you're limited. And People get discouraged, and I fear that our community is going to feel that way when it comes to restoration of rights, when it comes to immigration. They're going to feel unmotivated. If it is Hillary Clinton, it's going to be hard for her to say, I'm going to pass immigration reform. I'm going to make sure every American in this country who is released from prison, who has served their time, is going to restore their rights automatically. Because you know what? We've been hearing that for 8 years, and we've been unsuccessful. Not because President Obama didn't want to be, because he was limited. He was one person in the whole governmental system. So you and I, if those are our passionate points, and we've sat for 8 years and had nothing happen, what's going to make us think a new face saying it all over again is going to get us going? And I think the Republican Party, in a sense, is banking on it.